Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody's doing well. Man, oh man, this story, I had forgotten about this story. And I was reminded of it over the weekend because of all the cheating stuff that's happened over the last couple months. And everybody's really hyper-focused on cheaters right now. And I completely forgotten about this when I was a kid. And I happened to be with some gentlemen that were about 10 or 12 years older than I am. Okay? So they were in their 20s when this happened. I was just in middle school, about ready to go into high school. And I remember being at the tackle shop, okay, and, you know, putting stuff on the shelves, doing the ice bin, working with the live bait and all that stuff, blast. But I had come on just after this scandal had happened. So when I arrived, it had already happened, right? The year before, but it was being prosecuted a year later. So it happened in 1983, okay? Well, it didn't end up getting to the federal level of prosecution for about a year. So it was late summer of 1984, okay? And so we were talking about this. These guys are in their 20s. So it was a lot more, they were paying a lot more attention to it. The same way all these guys today, who are probably in their 20s and 30s, that are competing in these events, that are all talking about the cheating and all talk about the cheaters. So it's part of the community. It impacted them. Me, I was 14. I was like a 14-year-old snot-nosed kid, and just hearing all the old-timers talk about this and being like, man, everyone. And I remember like saying, like, everybody's going crazy about this stuff. And you got to remember back in the day, man, where everything was a picture board. Like people would bring in their photos or Polaroids and would put up on the board for their their catches with their kids and all that stuff. And so there was always a community area there where people would, whether they were waiting for it or they were waiting for the worms to get delivered, they were waiting for the live bait to get delivered at 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning on a Saturday morning. Trust me, was through plenty of those. Some kids had a paper route. Some kids worked in a tackle shop. Like, it's just kind of trajectory of kind of how it is. And people would be sitting around talking on the back of their trucks, whatever, waiting and all this stuff. And I remember, and like, but not really like comprehending, like, what were they really talking about now? Reflect on it. So over the weekend, because of the cheating scandal that is broken in Pennsylvania, the second one, by the way, this came up, and it was like, because I didn't know, like, all back then, like, what the real backstory of it all was. It was just, you could just tell people were, like, in shock, pissed, and, like, just, like, whatever. But you didn't have social media back in 1984, right? So, like, no one were walking around with cell phones in 1984. People were getting their information from, like, the newspaper, right? Not like today, okay? Where you can go viral and become famous like that, okay? So in 1983, all right, in my opinion now, looking back on it, and I'm sure there could be a few other ones, probably the most epic freaking cheating, ring. I would call it a ring, almost like racketeering or like RICO. Like it was a ring cheating scandal. Took place between Florida and Texas in 1983, okay? And it involved about 5, even to this day, some people claim, from what I understand, it was more than 5, but five or 6 people actually were involved in the case or charges at the federal level. Because remember, we're talking about Florida to Texas, crossing state lines, right? To commit fraud in a bass fishing tournament, okay? So these gentlemen, led by one Elro Vernon McNeil. He was 31 years old when he orchestrated this, okay? So he first went, reportedly, the first time he went to Florida, and basically secured a large Florida strain largemouth bass, okay, for himself, to use in a tournament in Texas, East Texas, I think, and got away with it, okay? Yeah, usually if you get away with something, you tend to try to get away with it again, right? And so he reportedly recruited a network, created a network of individuals that would transport fish from St. Cloud, Florida, all the way, let's just say Dallas. We're going to say East Texas, but we'll just say Dallas. That's almost 17 hours away. St. Cloud is a little bit below Orlando, okay? So from Central Florida all the way to East Texas-ish, because these tournaments that these guys were fishing in were primarily all East Texas. I think there might have been one in Louisiana as well, but I don't think that it was ended up being part of the federal case, okay? These guys created a network where they were transporting Florida strain largemouth bass from Central Florida all the way to Texas, okay, alive, okay? In the beginning, not so much. Remember, this is 1983, okay? So basically, tried transporting the bass in a cooler. Reportedly, that fish didn't make it, okay? There are some reports that he froze it and then thawed it or whatever, and it's still, whatever, okay? You know, you weren't out there to, like, figure out how that went down and how it got, you know, through at a weigh-in. So that's kind of crazy, right? Because back then, people weren't videographing, right? They weren't live streaming weigh-ins like they are today. Weights and fish. Remember that live stream? Like, you know what I mean? It was like there weren't anybody there. It was just the people that were there. That was it. It's the only people that could report on anything. There was no video. There was no video footage. Any of that. This is 1983. Okay? Imagine today, right? So they created this network of guys transporting fish. Not just McNeil later on came out, years, later. There were other people that were going to Florida and getting these bass, putting them in aerated tanks in a truck that was modified, and bringing them back to compete in these tournaments. Okay? We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in 1983. Okay? Look at where bass is today. Look at what the payouts are today for the Bassmaster Elite Series. Okay? These were not elite trails, okay, based on our standard. These were regional trails in Texas, okay? But based on our standard, you know, they weren't at the elite level, but they were paying out in the early 80s massive amounts of money. So there was up to a half a dozen or more events in which these guys, okay, in this ring, led by McNeil, okay, which had the other co-conspirators in it, Kerry Harmon, Kenneth Puckett, Gary Parkinson, Parkinson. Okay, they were all charged as well because they were part of the ring, the conspiracy really to commit fraud, tournament fraud, right? Which is what, when you cheat in a tournament, it is. It's fraud, okay? When you're doing weights and fish and things like that. And back then, I mean, think about this. Back then, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some say that these guys raked in over $350, somewhere between $350 and $500,000 in 1983. In that year, before getting caught. Okay? And you got to remember, and a lot of people these days have no clue. Like, I bet 98% of the people that you would ask if they know who Elroy McNeil is, they're not going to know who it is. Especially these young bucks, these kids today, 20s and 30s, 30-year-olds. These guys are all 70 years old now, if they're still alive. Okay? That tells you a lot. I mean, right there, like, you know. And people kind of live in the moment, like, this is the biggest, it's all, you got, guys, you understand, like, it's all clickbait, it's all like, I mean, the current, put it this way, the current kayak cheating scandal of the cutout kayak on the back of a boat made it on Ben Milliken's podcast, okay? Why? For clicks. I mean, come on. Like, it's not even remotely the worst cheating scandal to ever hit fishing, okay? It's not. It's not even the first time that's been done before, okay? First time someone got caught in the tournament, okay? But not the first time it's gotten done. So it's not, it is egregious, okay? Make no mistake, all cheating is, all right? But it's certainly not the most scandalous. You want to talk about scandalous? You want to talk about, like, holy shit, like, crazy shit. A network of anglers bringing live fish from Florida to Texas. In 1983, 16-hour drives back and forth. Okay? Bringing fish to enter those fish in tournaments. Okay? And sometimes stacking an event to where the co-conspirators finished 1, 2, 3. Okay? In the event. Intentionally, they crafted it so they could finish 1, 2, 3, get all the money, and then pool the money together, according to the court documents, pull the money together and then distribute it equally amongst all the conspirators. So they were all in it together. Okay? So it wasn't just McNeil, okay, benefiting. It was all of them. And they even recruited people to compete in tournaments that weren't like tournament anglers. That's what's crazy about this. Even off events, where these fish would be used in multiple tournaments in East Texas, okay? Multiple tournaments, as long as they were kept alive, okay? Think about that. And nowadays, I can't, like, it's hard to comprehend that. Like, it's like, wait, how are events run in the 80s? Like, they gave the fish back to the anglers back then. Nowadays, you know, the angler goes up on stage, they weigh it or whatever, and the guy takes it in the bag, they put it in the water, and then they give it to the guy, and usually they go on now a boat or whatever, and they get re-released by MLF or Bass or whoever. The anglers really, they don't take them back to their live wells, right? Typically. But back in the 80s, there wasn't that whole, like, chain of custody deal. Like, with the, like, guys returned to drop the fish in the water, you know? I remember seeing that when I was 14 years old on the James River for events on the James River where guys would go and get their fish weighed in and then they would take it. They would go right over to the bridge, walk out right on the back and drop the freaking fish into the James River. That was like it. It went from catching it to live well to weigh in, dump back in the river. Okay. So I guess they recycled these fish, right? And guys began to notice, like, okay, and after a while, like, you know, remember, people weren't taking pictures of these fish other than like maybe a Polaroid picture that would go on the wall at the local tackle shop in East Texas or whatever. It wasn't like cell phones, didn't exist. It wasn't like live streaming, didn't exist. It wasn't any of that stuff. So they were able to get away with this for about a year. Some people say 16 months, okay? And before they finally did get caught, which is crazy if you think about it. And again, takes one guy to flip on the ring. This is what you see happening now, okay? Up in Pennsylvania. It took a guy or guys or whatever to flip on the guy, okay? And basically, you know, in this case, became a witness, okay? What made this story was so crazy, and the reason why I remember it now so vividly wasn't like the fit. I remember now the guy coming in, you know, when you go in the old stores and the bell rings, like, you know what I mean, like, ding. So you know somebody came in. Remember that shit when you were little? I don't know if they still do that anymore anywhere. I remember the guy freaking coming in, okay? Paper in his hand, and basically dropping that one of the guys was dead. I remember that, like, it just light bulb. I remember the guy coming in and looking back and being like, no, it was all crazy in there because one of the guys who was involved in it knew of the network, knew of everything, knew of this whole freaking thing. Was dropping dime, okay? Was talking to had been talking to the feds and giving them all the information and all the names and all the players and everything that went down, how it was orchestrated, what they did, where they were buying the fish from, getting the fish from in Florida, okay? All of those things. Well, lo and behold, this gentleman with the last name Davies was found dead, okay? Dead. Shot dead. Now, of course, this is 1983. Okay, and so again, there's not all this coverage, right? Like it's all like like newspaper and maybe on the local news, but there was no like internet, right? So there was all this like, he was murdered. I remember that was like the speculation is he got whacked because he was going to testify against the network. Now, that's what I remember that as a kid. Like that was what was being said. Ultimately, they determined that Mr. Davies committed suicide because of the day before he was supposed to testify. I don't know if that was a grand jury testimony or whatever. It was federal court. The day before he was supposed to testify, he was found dead. Okay? Just crazy, right? And so, there's still some debate today, right? Like, was he whacked? Or did he commit suicide? Remember, that's 1983. The technology today is a lot better. And then the other thing I was thinking about was, over the weekend, when we were like talking about this, is given today, forget about all the social media and all that stuff today. If you were the tournament directors and you were involved in all that, today, we got DNA testing, genetic testing of fish. We just take the fins, right? And that's how we can identify different kinds of bass, Alabama bass from Kentucky bass, right? Like we can strike, all the different types of black bass. We can easily identify them now because we basically have dialed in the DNA and all that stuff, right? Well, back in 1983, 84, I don't know if they had that. But it does beg the question, like, in today, if they had that technology back then, they would have been able to test those fish, the fins on those fish. And they would have been able to come back and be identified as Florida strain, right? When did they start stocking Florida strain bass in Texas? Like, so that may have been a flag. I don't remember. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. It'd be a different question for Texas wildlife. I don't know. Because Texas has its own. Like, I don't know what the difference is between Texas largemouth bass native and then the introduction of Florida strain, when that happened, because Texas got massive bass. Okay, I don't know when all that began. Was it in that time frame? Did these fish look different? I will say this: there is a story running tandem to this one, where one of the guys submitted an 8.7 pound largemouth bass that really took people back. Like, I can even imagine if it was today, right? And there was a lot of suspicion around that kind of triggered a lot of other people talking. It's sort of this. It reminds me now, talking to the guys, about how everybody perceived weights and fish in the walleye scandal, right? Like, everybody had thought that these guys were doing something nefarious for a year. Multiple events prior. Remember, they had won a boat. They had won all kinds of money before that. And so there was always that suspicion. I imagine there was always the suspicion of this current Pennsylvania angler, the kayak angler. Okay? But again, it was never proven. Okay? Until it was. Right? And so you got to put yourself back in 1983 when you don't have phones and you don't have social media. How is everybody communicating, about this event upstate, this event over towards Dallas, Fort Worth, this event towards Louisiana? Like, it much harder for everybody to, put the pieces of the puzzle together. That's why it took the feds to do it. And probably why it took over a year to, do it is all the interviews and all of those things to ultimately get these guys and expose this network for what it was. It was absolutely, in my opinion now, the worst cheating scandal in the history of bass fishing, tournament bass fishing. It so far supersedes weights and fish, okay? Whatever the kayak deal is, okay? Cages of fish, okay? Now, a lot of people equate money with things being the most egregious stuff. So, if you won in a tournament for $300,000 and you had you had bass in a crate at a dock, and you want it that way. People, because of the money involved, people want to be like, that's the most whatever. For me, I don't know. That shit happened. That shit's been going on forever, my whole life, with the baskets of fish. It's going on forever. There are a lot of people who contend that a lot of people at the bass level and at the, like the Stren level, the FLW, all these levels going way, way back. Red Man, I think, was another one, right? Way, way back. There are still people, old timers today, that still tell me that freaking people cheated back then. Just never could prove it, but they always suspected. They always knew who they suspected the cheaters were. Okay? People have been cheating since 1970. Okay? Like, since Bass was created, since Ray Scott founded Bass in 70-71, their first Bassmaster Classic, until now, at all levels of fishing, there's been cheating. It's not new. Okay? But this one, with a network and a conspiracy, almost like racketeering, like where like you've got a network of people involved. It's almost like drug distribution, right? Like you got a whole network, right? I don't think you could top that. So look it up. 1983, 1984, bass fishing Texas cheating scandal. Elrod McNeil, man. Blast from the freaking past. Like those guys got to be in their 70s by now. All these guys were in their early 30s. Okay? Early 30s. Another thing that was kind of that came out of that, one of the guys said was, these guys said it to where they had already had drugs in their system in the event that they would get polygraphed. Remember, this is 1983 now. So these guys were taking hardcore, these guys were taking like Valium and like stuff, barbiturates kind of deal, like getting into their bodies to cause them to be able to be relaxed for like in the event that there would be any polygraph in any event. Okay? That shit's mind-boggling. And then of course they passed polygraphs. Okay? I think they said one of the guys didn't. One of the guys at some point or other didn't pass polygraph or something. But most of the guys had been polygraphed before and passed. So what does that tell you about polygraphs? Okay, so whenever even today, 2025, I don't know if the polygraph testing is any different than it was in the 80s. I don't know. It seems maybe that the devices. I don't know, but we've had time after time over history where people have passed polygraphs that have been found guilty, like in courts of law, guilty, right? And yet we somehow bass fishing still relies on polygraphs as something. Most states they're not even admissible in court, but yet that seems to be like, he failed a polygraph or he passed a polygraph. Well, they kind of don't really mean anything anymore. I mean, if you look at how many times anglers, passed a polygraph and were later found to actually be cheaters, or guys that failed a polygraph, like young guys nervous or whatever, got DQ'd from an event, but most people don't believe that he should have been disqualified, from an event or whatever. And it's kind of crazy if you think about like the logistics involved in 1983, in the aeration, the science involved of being able to transport 4 and 5 pound largemouth bass from Florida. 16 hours to East Texas. Or Dallas is about 16 hours from St. Cloud. So 13 to 16 hours, East Texas. Pull up somewhere and divvy out the bass to people's live wells. This happened. This is what's crazy. This happened. The truck would pull up. Reportedly, the truck would pull up and they'd meet. The boats would all come to the truck and they would put these bass in the live well, which tells me the live wells weren't being checked in 1983, right? When anglers took off. Nobody was checking anglers' live wells back then. And they still don't probably today, except maybe, if you may have your equipment or something checked. I guess I don't know how it works, to be honest. Like today, everything just seems kind of like we only check the top two people or whatever for stuff. I don't know. That's just absurd to me. You got 80 to 100 guys in your freaking event competition. I mean, when they check in, how come you can't check their freaking licenses and check their boater registrations and check their insurance? Like, have a check-in. They're professional anglers. Why are professional anglers getting pinned for not having insurance on their boat during the event or after the event? Like, that's on Bass. Anglers should have to check in, show you their proper fishing permit for the state in which the event's in, and then their boater shit, and then their insurance on their boat. Like, isn't that hard? Like, I just don't understand it. This shit happens all the time. Happened again. It happened last year. Okay? Like, I mean, it happened to freaking Swindle. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, come on. But this is what happens. It's like some things we've evolved, other things we just stuck in stupid ways of doing things. But these guys had it down until they didn't. Until someone rolled on them. Multiple events, upwards of 300 to 500,000, depending on who you ask and what you can find online about it. But definitely 3 of these guys, $100,000 events. A few of the events, they got 1, 2, 3, then split the pot. But these guys would meet. Like, you think about this, man. Think about that. You meet in some area. You meet somewhere, right? And think about how fish are like dumped when they stock fish. Those trucks, right? They got those aeration and all that, and all the fish are in the truck, and they just freaking dump them in the river or the lake, whatever. Truck pulls up. These guys back their freaking boats or whatever in around them, and they're dropping 3 fish in each of the freaking whatever, or 4, whatever it is. One guy didn't even freaking fish in the event at one time. He never even actually fished in the event, but he turned the fish in at the weigh-in. That's how crazy this shit was. They recruited people. You can sure as heck bet that there are more than 6 or 7 guys. Those are the competitors. People had to know about the fish and know where did the fish go. Like you know what I'm saying? During the processes of using them in multiple events, where were these fish being stored between events, right? This story is freaking crazy. And most people, I had forgotten. Because I was just 14 years old when it went down. And nowadays, I just don't think these anglers have a clue. Like, they think that, a guy doing a cutout thing and putting it in the back of the boat is somehow the worst freaking thing to ever happen in fishing. Yeah, in the moment, I guess, right now, until another shoe drops. Until someone gets caught cheating somewhere else, and then we're on to that. I mean, that's social media. But brazen, for sure, but not like freaking Elrod. Not like 1983, 84. Probably couldn't happen today. Too many moving parts to happen today with social media and photos of all the fish and everything that could kind of take place. You probably couldn't do that today, in a major event and get away with it. But back in the early 80s, you could see someone getting away with that. Just because everything was in person. There was no as really. It was Polaroids, Kodak. You know what I mean? It was it wasn't, as scrutinized as it is today, right? So I agree. There are probably, because we debated this year, are there more cheaters today than there were back then? Probably not. It's probably the same. We're just discovering the cheaters more, right, than back then, and they're becoming more notorious because they're being given notoriety, right? I mean, because of social media, so more people now are aware of these individuals than say in 1983, where everybody had to wait for freaking newspapers, magazines, or whatever. Really to follow the story. It wasn't like you could follow the story 24/7 on your phone, right? So you had to wait. And so that stuff would just keep trickling out. And just crazy, man. So 1983, okay, you can Google this, 1983, Elrod McNeil cheating scandal in Texas, and just read about this. It is absolutely crazy. And for me, the backstop for me is just, I remember as a kid, old timers coming in and just talking about this. Crazy, especially when that individual was found dead who was supposed to testify against everybody. That was crazy, man. And you know, just being a kid in a freaking tackle shop, not really knowing like what's going on. You know, but hearing all the old timers, just like it was like wildfire. I mean, everybody had something to say about it. Everybody was kind of showing up at the tackle shop at like 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, outside. Freaking, it was like at that time frame. It was like late summer. It wasn't Labor Day yet. It had to have been August, and so it was still like hot in the morning, right? And so guys would be loading to getting their ice and packing everything out, and freaking like just like man, it was just crazy, man. But yeah, that's crazy. 40 some years ago, is that 30, 40, but 40 years ago, I guess. Crazy story, but check it out. All right, guys. So when you hear about all the cheating stuff going on, you know, it's probably gonna hit all your interwebs. Google that one, man, because that one is a good read and it really makes you go, damn, somebody masterminded a serious freaking fraud ring to defraud people of money over the course of like 16 months and got away with it, and probably, you know, and pretty much had everybody fooled until they didn't. Kind of crazy, and that was a federal case. Can you imagine if a federal case involving bass fishing hit our news or our feeds today on social media? It would be absolutely crazy. All right, guys.